Hey there, Marine. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, welcome aboard.
We're going to be taking a look at MCDP 1 to 4.
You know, competition.
It's a pretty important document, right? Helps us understand how we compete in this crazy world.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head.
And, even though we're not Marines or ourselves, we've been studying this thing pretty hard.
Oh, yeah, we've done our homework.
So we're going to break it down for you in a way that hopefully makes sense. Cut through the jargon, give you the key takeaways.
Absolutely, and maybe some real-world examples you can relate to.
Exactly.
Right.
So let's jump right in. One of the things that really struck me about MCDP 1 to 4 is how it talks about competition.
Yeah.
It's not just about war anymore.
Right. It's like, well, it kind of expands the battlefield, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's saying that Marines need to be ready to compete in all sorts of situations.
It's like the world's one giant chessboard now.
That's a great way to put it.
Every move matters.
Every move counts. And it's not just about moving troops and tanks. It's about using all the tools we have. Diplomacy, humanitarian aid, heck, even the way we present ourselves on the world stage. That's all part of the competition.
So it's not just about being the strongest or the fastest anymore.
It's about being the smartest.
Yeah, you got to play the game right.
Absolutely. And that's where that whole concept of maneuver warfare comes in, right?
Oh, yeah. Maneuver warfare.
Something you guys know a lot about. MCDP 1 to 4 really takes that idea and applies it to this whole broader spectrum of competition.
So we're not just outmaneuvering tanks and troops anymore. We're outmaneuvering, what? Ideas, narratives.
You got it. Think about the OODA loop.
Observe, orient, decide, act. Classic.
That cycle of decision-making isn't just for firefights, right? It applies to everything. Countering a disinformation campaign, responding to a natural disaster.
You name it.
The faster you can cycle through that loop, the quicker you can adapt. Gain an advantage no matter what you're facing.
So we're seeing the bigger picture. We're thinking in terms of maneuver warfare. But there's another big piece of this puzzle, right?
Yeah.
MCDP 1 to 4 really stresses the importance of, orienting on the competitor.
Knowing your enemy. Right.
Like Sun Tzu said, know your enemy and know yourself, and in 100 battles, you will never be defeated.
Right. But it's not just about knowing their capabilities, how many tanks they have or what kind of weapons they use.
Deeper than that.
It's about understanding how they think, what motivates them, what their goals are. It's about seeing the world through their eyes.
And that's where things can get tricky.
Oh, yeah. MCDP 1 to 4 warns us about falling into that trap of mirror imaging.
Assuming everyone thinks like us.
Exactly. We can't just project our own values and assumptions onto our adversaries. We've got to understand where they're coming from. Their cultural background, their political systems, their history, all of that stuff shapes how they make decisions.
We've got a great example of this from Operation Iraqi Freedom, right?
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
You remember how the Joint Special Operations Task Force initially struggled against al-Qaeda in Iraq?
Right.
Because AQI was so decentralized, so fast-moving.
It was a different kind of enemy.
Not the traditional kind of force they were used to fighting.
Yeah.
So they had to adapt. They studied AQI's network, how they communicated, how they made decisions.
Fascinating.
And then they restructured their own organization to be more agile, more responsive.
So they basically beat AQI at their own game.
Pretty much. By understanding how AQI operated.
Interesting.
You were able to outmaneuver them, in that cognitive space.
Right. It wasn't just about having better equipment or more firepower. It was about outsmarting the enemy.
Exactly. A classic example of how those maneuver warfare principles can apply to all sorts of challenges, not just the traditional battlefield.
I like it.
So we're getting a feel for this strategic landscape, right? We're thinking about maneuver warfare. We're understanding our rivals. But MCDP 1 to 4 goes even further. It urges Marines to shape the competitive environment.
Shape it.
Yeah. Be proactive, think several steps ahead.
Set the conditions for success.
Instead of just reacting to events. We're trying to anticipate them, influence them in our favor.
I like the way you're thinking. It's like a gardener tending their plants.
Okay.
They don't just wait for things to happen. They're out there cultivating the soil, pruning the branches, creating the conditions for growth.
Interesting.
In the same way, Marines can shape the competitive environment by building partnerships, conducting training exercises, engaging in diplomacy, projecting a strong, incredible military presence.
So shaping this environment, it sounds like it requires a lot of long-term thinking.
It absolutely does.
Almost like you're playing a game of chess where those moves can take years to play out.
That's a good way to put it. You got to be thinking 5, 10, 20 steps ahead. And you know what? One of the best examples of this shaping thing comes from before World War II. Yeah. The United States was worried about, Nazi Germany's influence in South America.
Right, right.
Couldn't just send troops. That would have been way too provocative.
Start a war.
Exactly. So they needed a more subtle approach, something that wouldn't, escalate things.
So what did they do?
Well, they launched the Airport Development Program.
The Airport Development Program. What's that?
On the surface, it seemed like a purely commercial thing. Pan American Airways, with some, shall we say, discreet government backing, started building and improving airports all over South America.
Okay. So building airports was a strategic move.
Oh, yeah. Brilliant, really.
Yeah.
By creating this network of modern airports.
Mm.
The U.S. was able to subtly counter that Nazi influence, strengthen ties with South American countries, and, kind of position themselves for potential future operations in the region.
Wow.
All without firing a shot.
That's incredible. I never would have thought about it that way.
Yeah.
So building airports can actually be a way of
Shaping the environment.
shaping the environment, yeah.
And it shows that shaping isn't just about military power, right? It's about using all the tools we have. Diplomacy, economics, information, even infrastructure.
So we've talked about maneuver warfare thinking, understanding our competitors, shaping the environment. What's next? What's the next layer to this onion?
Well, you can't talk about the Marine Corps without talking about combined arms, right?
Of course not. Combined arms. It's what? Integrating different capabilities, infantry, artillery, air power, all working together seamlessly.
Exactly. But MCDP 1-4 takes this concept beyond the battlefield. It's about combining arms across the entire spectrum of competition.
Okay. So we're not just talking about tanks and aircraft working together anymore.
Right.
What else is there?
Think about diplomats, aid workers, intelligence analysts, cyber specialists, all contributing to the mission. It's about breaking down those traditional silos and working together.
So instead of just, thinking about tanks and aircraft working together, we're now thinking about diplomats, aid workers, even cyber specialists, all part of the same team.
Exactly.
Wow.
Imagine a Marine squad working with, let's say, a Coast Guard officer to enforce maritime law,
Okay.
or partnering with USA to deliver humanitarian aid after a natural disaster.
Right. Combining their unique skill sets.
Creating a force multiplier, achieving results that neither could accomplish alone.
Greater than the sum of their parts.
Precisely. And this combined arms thing, it can take a lot of different forms in this competitive space. Think about intelligence sharing.
Okay.
Combining sensor data from multiple sources.
Satellites, drones.
Yeah, even allies and partners.
To create a more complete picture of what's going on.
Exactly. Or think about countering, let's say, a disinformation campaign.
Right.
You might need to combine military intelligence with public affairs messaging, even diplomatic outreach to expose the truth.
Wow. So combined arms in the 21st century.
It's about using every asset, every capability, every partnership to gain an advantage.
This is really making me rethink how we approach competition. It's not just about military might anymore.
No.
It's about all these other things. Harnessing combined arms, understanding our rivals, shaping the environment to get what we want. It's a lot to take in.
It is. And you know what? That leads us to another key concept from MCDP 1-4.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Campaigns of competition.
Campaigns of competition. Now that sounds like a long-term thing.
You're on the right track. These are long-term efforts.
Years.
Decades, sometimes. Aimed at advancing national interests, achieving specific objectives in this competitive space we keep talking about.
So it's not just about winning battles. It's like playing the long game.
Exactly. And MCDP 1-4 offers some really valuable guidance on how to approach this. It stresses aligning our efforts with national strategy, setting clear objectives, and being consistent.
Consistency.
That makes sense.
You can't just react to every little thing. You got to have a plan and stick to it. It shows resolve. So consistency is about being that reliable partner, right? The one who always shows up, follows through.
Exactly. It builds trust, builds credibility.
Makes sense.
But remember, consistency doesn't mean being rigid. You still got to be flexible, adaptable, ready to adjust to changing circumstances.
Oh, absolutely. It's like navigating a ship through rough seas.
Right. Perfect analogy.
You might have to adjust course,
Sure.
but the destination stays the same.
You got it. And speaking of staying on course,
Yeah.
we got to talk about tempo. MCDP 1-4 talks about tempo being driven by that action-reaction cycle.
Oh, the action-reaction cycle.
Every move you make, every action you take.
Triggers a response.
Exactly. You got to be ready for that.
So it's like a constant back and forth, a game of chess where every move changes the whole board.
Exactly. It's a dynamic interplay. And the tempo of this dance, well, it can change.
Sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's fast.
Sometimes it's a waltz, sometimes it's a tango.
Wow, I like that.
But the key is to be able to recognize those shifts in tempo. Know when to make a bold move and when to exercise restraint.
That sounds incredibly challenging.
Yeah, it is.
Especially in those situations where things are changing so rapidly.
It is.
How do you know when to speed up and when to slow down?
Well, that's where judgment comes in and experience. But MCDP 1 to 4, it gives us a framework, right?
The OODA loop.
Observe, orient, decide, act. Constantly assessing the situation, understanding the opponent, making the appropriate decision. Whether it's a decisive action, a calculated pause, it's about staying ahead of the game.
So it's not just reacting, it's anticipating, disrupting their plans.
You got it. And that brings us back to that whole thing about understanding our adversaries, their motivations.
Right.
We need to think like they think, anticipate their next move, stay one step ahead in this strategic dance.
This is really making me think differently about how we approach competition. It's not just about military strength, It's this whole other range of factors. Economic influence, technological innovation, diplomatic skill.
And the battle for hearts and minds.
Oh, right. The narrative.
Exactly. Competing narratives. Because in today's information environment, narratives are powerful. They shape perceptions, influence public opinion, and ultimately determine who has the moral high ground.
So it's not just about having the best weapons or the biggest economy.
Right.
It's about winning the battle of ideas.
Absolutely. It's about crafting compelling narratives that resonate with people, communicating effectively, countering your opponent's propaganda, building support for your cause.
So Marines aren't just warriors anymore, huh? They're storytellers, diplomats, influencers.
In a way, yes, the lines have blurred. Marines need to be versatile, adaptable, able to operate across a wide spectrum of activities.
This is giving me a whole new perspective on what it means to be a Marine in the 21st century. It's not just about fighting wars. It's about shaping the future, promoting peace, upholding our values.
And MCDP 1 to 4 provides that roadmap.
It's a lot to digest.
It is.
But it's incredibly insightful. It really makes you think.
And we've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to unpack in this document.
Yeah, this is great stuff.
It is.
We've got a lot more to cover, Marines, so stay tuned.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
We'll dive even deeper into MCDP 1 to 4 in the next segment.
And we'll talk about what it all means for you, your role in shaping the future.
Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back, Marine. We were talking about those campaigns of competition before the break. Those big strategic efforts to, advance our national interests.
Right, and how those campaigns, they're not usually about one big knockout punch.
Yeah, it's more like a marathon, right?
Okay.
Long game.
Yeah.
You got to make steady progress, adapt to your opponent's moves. You're not going to win it all in one shot.
More like a chess match that could take years to play out.
Exactly. And, MCDP 1 to 4, it emphasizes being consistent in these campaigns. Why do you think that is?
Well, it makes sense, right? If you're consistent, it shows you're serious about your goals. It builds credibility with your allies. They know they can count on you.
It's about demonstrating resolve.
Yeah.
Showing your competitors that you're not going to back down. You're in it for the long haul.
So consistency, it's about being that reliable partner, the one who always shows up, follows through on their commitments.
Exactly. And that can have a huge impact on the world stage. You build a reputation for being dependable, trustworthy.
Like, if you're consistent, people know what to expect from you. You're not going to suddenly change course and leave them hanging.
Right. But remember, consistency doesn't mean being rigid. You got to be flexible, too.
Yeah.
Able to adapt to changing circumstances.
Oh, absolutely. You got to be able to adjust, improvise, overcome.
Yeah.
It's like navigating a ship through a storm.
Good analogy. You might have to adjust your course a little bit.
Sure.
But your destination stays the same.
You got it. So we're talking about these long-term goals, these consistent strategies. And I'm thinking about how understanding the tempo of competition is really important.
Tempo, yeah. MCDP 1 to 4 talks about how tempo is driven by that action-reaction cycle.
Right. The action-reaction cycle. I always thought of tempo as something that mainly applied to, like, combat operations.
Sure, like the speed of an attack, the pace of maneuver.
Exactly. But now I'm starting to see how it plays a role in this bigger competitive space, too.
It absolutely does. Tempo is crucial in combat, but it's equally important in diplomacy, economics, information warfare. The principle is the same. Every action you take is going to provoke a response.
So it's like a constant back and forth, a game of chess where every move changes the board.
That's a great way to put it. It's a dynamic interplay, and the
Yeah.
tempo of this dance, it can vary.
Right. Sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's fast.
Sometimes it's a waltz, sometimes it's a tango.
I like that. But navigating those different tempos, it seems like it could be really tough.
Right.
Out there in the real world, trying to make sense of this complex situation.
It is. It takes judgment, experience. But MCDP 1-4, it offers some guidance. It emphasizes the OODA loop.
Observe, orient, decide, act.
Yeah, exactly. Constantly assessing the situation, understanding your opponent, making the most appropriate decision.
So it's about making the right call, whether it's a bold move to seize the initiative or a calculated pause to gather more intel.
You got it. It's not just about reacting. It's about getting inside your competitor's decision-making cycle, anticipating their moves, disrupting their plans.
It's like you're not just playing the game, you're trying to control the pace of the game.
Exactly. And that's where understanding your opponent is so important. You need to be able to anticipate their reactions, to see the chessboard from their perspective.
This is all making a lot of sense. But I'm also thinking about, the potential downsides. What about the costs of competition? It can't all be about winning, right?
That's a crucial point. Competition always comes with a cost, whether it's on the battlefield, in diplomacy, in economics. It requires resources, manpower, often sacrifice.
Those costs can be high, especially when we're talking about human lives.
Absolutely. And that's why MCDP 1-4 warns against imposing costs on ourselves that we can't sustain. We need to be mindful of our own limitations.
So it's about winning smartly, making sure our victories don't come at too high a price.
Right. It's about choosing your battles carefully. Not every fight is worth fighting.
It's like in chess, Sometimes you have to sacrifice a pawn to protect a more valuable piece.
Exactly. It's about strategic thinking, weighing the potential benefits of any action against the potential costs.
So you're constantly evaluating, right? Asking yourself, will this action help us achieve our long-term goals? Or will it drain our resources and distract us from what's really important?
You got it. It's a balancing act, trying to find that sweet spot between being assertive and being prudent.
And that balance gets even more complicated when you factor in the need to work with partners and allies.
Absolutely. In today's world, we rarely compete in isolation. We need to build those coalitions, share resources, coordinate actions to achieve our goals.
So it's about recognizing that we're stronger together than we are apart.
Exactly. Combined arms, it's not just about military power. It's about leveraging all the tools at our disposal, diplomatic, economic, informational, cultural, to gain an advantage.
It's about building those relationships, fostering those partnerships.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, that's how we're going to succeed in this competitive environment.
You're absolutely right. And that brings us back to this idea of competing narratives.
Right. It's not enough to just have the strongest military or the most advanced technology. We also need to win the battle of ideas.
Exactly, because narratives, they shape perceptions, they influence public opinion, and ultimately they determine who has the moral high ground.
So it's not just about winning on the battlefield. It's about winning in the hearts and minds of people.
You got it. It's about crafting a compelling story, a story that resonates with people, that promotes our values, that shows the world why our vision is a better one.
So Marines, they're not just warriors. They're also storytellers. They're diplomats. They're ambassadors for our country.
That's right. In the modern world, those lines are blurred. Marines need to be versatile, they need to be adaptable, they need to be able to engage with people from all walks of life, to build relationships, to project a positive image.
This is really giving me a new perspective on what it means to be a Marine in the 21st century.
It's a challenging but incredibly important role.
Absolutely. So much more than just fighting wars. It's about shaping the future. It's about winning the peace. It's about upholding those values that our nation stands for.
And MCDP 1-4, it gives us that framework, that roadmap for navigating this complex and competitive world.
Well said. I think we've covered a lot of ground here today.
It have. From the importance of understanding our adversaries to the power of combined arms. From the challenges of tempo to the significance of competing narratives.
It's a lot to take in, but it's essential knowledge for any Marine who wants to succeed in today's world.
You're absolutely right. And in the next segment, we're going to dive into some specific examples of how these principles are being applied in the real world.
Excellent. I can't wait to hear about those real-world applications. But for now, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back to continue our deep dive into MCDP 1-4. Welcome back, Marine. We've been digging deep into MCDP 1-4, talking about competition, maneuver warfare, shaping the environment, all those big ideas.
The strategic landscape.
Exactly. But now we want to bring it all home for you. Connect those big ideas to what you do every day as a Marine.
Because at the end of the day, MCDP 1 to 4, it's not just some theory. It's a call to action. It's about how you make decisions and get things done in a world that's, well, pretty complicated.
It's definitely not getting any simpler out there.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how you can actually apply these principles
Yeah.
in your daily life and your missions.
Let's get practical.
Exactly. Where do we start?
Well, remember how we talked about understanding the opponent? That's got to be the foundation.
Knowing your enemy, right? Sun Tzu.
Yeah, but it's more than just knowing their capabilities, how many tanks they have, what kind of weapons they use.
It's about their motivations, their goals.
Exactly. You got to understand how they think, what makes them tick, what are they trying to achieve, what's their worldview. See the chessboard from their side.
Like putting yourself in their shoes.
In a way, yeah. And remember that example we talked about from Operation Iraqi Freedom?
The Joint Special Operations Task Force adapting to AQI.
Right. They realized they couldn't fight this enemy with the same old playbook. They had to understand AQI's network, how they made decisions, and then they changed their own structure to match that agility, that decentralized approach.
So they beat AQI at their own game.
Pretty much,
Yeah.
by understanding how they operated.
So for you, Marine, think about who you're facing in your area of operations. What are their strengths and weaknesses? What's their cultural background? How do they use information? How do they make decisions? All that stuff matters.
And remember, don't fall into that mirror imaging trap. Don't assume everyone thinks like you. Different cultures, different values, different priorities.
Right. It's about empathy, understanding, seeing the world through their eyes.
It can make all the difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, how about shaping the competitive environment? We talked about how, forced posture sends a message.
Where Marines are deployed, how they train. Yeah.
But those are usually big decisions made way up the chain.
Yeah.
How can you, as an individual Marine, contribute to shaping things?
That's a good question. It's easy to feel like you don't have much influence on those big strategic decisions.
Especially when you're out there on the ground.
Right. But I think it comes down to the little things. The way you carry yourself, how you interact with people, the image you project. Remember, every Marine is an ambassador.
For the United States, for the Marine Corps.
Exactly. Whether you're on a training exercise with partner nations, doing humanitarian aid, or just talking to locals in a foreign country, you're shaping perceptions.
Your actions, your words, your professionalism, it all adds up.
It's like that old saying, actions speak louder than words.
You might not be writing policy, but you're shaping opinions, one interaction at a time.
And that ties directly into competing narratives.
Yeah.
You're not just a Marine, you're a storyteller.
The things you do, they tell a story.
About the U.S., about the Marine Corps, about our values. So be mindful of the story you're telling. Are you showing strength, respect? Are you living up to the standards of the Corps?
Because in this information age, perception is everything. A photo, a video, it can go viral and shape global opinion in an instant.
You have a responsibility to represent your country and your Corps well.
Okay, let's switch gears for a second. Combined arms. We talked about how that's not just about tanks and planes anymore. It's about working with all sorts of partners.
Yeah.
Other government agencies, NGOs, even private companies.
Because in today's world, we can't do it alone. We need to leverage everyone's strengths, work together to achieve those common goals.
In combined arms, it doesn't have to be some big, complicated thing. It can be as simple as coordinating with local police during a humanitarian mission, or sharing intelligence with a partner nation's military.
Right. It's about being open to collaboration, breaking down those silos, thinking outside the box.
And information sharing. That's a big part of combined arms these days.
MCDP 1 to 4 is really clear about that. Share information with allies, partners. Get that bigger picture of the adversary.
So even if you think the information you have is small, insignificant,
Report it. Share it. You never know how it might fit into the bigger puzzle.
now let's talk about those long-term strategic efforts. Those campaigns of competition that can last for years.
Decades even.
It's easy to feel like your individual actions don't really matter when you're talking about something that big,
I get it. It can feel overwhelming. But remember that action-reaction cycle we talked about. Even small decisions can have ripple effects.
The butterfly effect.
Exactly. You might not be making those big strategic calls, but what you do on the ground, it can contribute to the overall success of the campaign.
Think about those everyday interactions, those training exercises, the relationships you build.
It might seem small in the moment, but it's all part of a bigger effort.
And always think about the consequences of your actions. How might the other side react? What message are you sending to the local population?
Be strategic, even in tactical situations.
So, Marine, as we wrap up this deep dive into MCDP 1 to 4, remember, it's a call to action. A challenge to be more than just a warrior.
A thinker, a strategist, a leader.
Because in today's world, the battle isn't just fought on the battlefield. It's fought in the minds of people, in the information space, in the realm of ideas.
So keep learning, keep adapting, keep pushing yourself to be the best Marine you can be.
And never underestimate the impact of your actions. No matter how small they may seem, they can make a difference. They can shape the world around you.
The future of the Marine Corps, the future of our nation, it depends on Marines like you, who can compete and win in this complex world.
Thanks for joining us, Marines. Stay safe out there.